Over the next 15 minutes, you're going to discover the reasons so many of you feel like you're destined for a lifetime of constant dieting, and exactly how you can start taking manageable steps towards a diet that's more optimal for your health. My name is Marisa Moon. I'm a Primal Health Coach and intermittent fasting instructor, and I want to guide you through instinctual carb moderation that can help free you from endless dieting for good. I love sharing concepts inspired by ancestral health or the influences of our ancient ancestors because this type of wisdom helps us end the confusion about what's healthy today. You can learn more about me and my philosophy on my new podcast called The Foundation of Wellness. Let's get started. Just like you, I've tried all of the dieting books and the programs out there, exercising my butt off at the gym and wondering, what am I doing wrong? I always stressed about getting back on my diet. Do you feel me? Well, what if I told you it's not a diet or a new workout routine that you need to end this madness? It's a major reality check and restart button. I'm talking about a foundational diet that makes so much sense and is so awesome and rewarding that you never want to stop eating that way. And it all begins with this reality check. How hard are you making your body work to keep up with your diet? How often are you giving your body a break from food? And what kind of food does your body expect from you? We've been trained to believe that a healthy eating strategy consists of whole grains and low fats and low calorie foods and 3 meals a day and all these snacks in between, and our meal times have to be ritualistic. But this doesn't make sense when we look back on the ways of ancient humans. For most of our existence on Earth, humans cycled between times of feast and food deprivation. Ancient humans ate really like 1 meal a day, and they were gathering and working all day, all throughout the day, not really eating. And then there were unsuccessful hunting trips and seasonal changes like winters and droughts that would mean they went long periods of time without food. Our human genes actually prefer this fragmented eating pattern and wild natural foods. But life's a lot different today, right? We don't really have to worry about food scarcity. But in recent decades, it was normal even to go 8 hours without food or 12 hours between your dinner the one night and then your next meal the next day. I mean, there weren't late night options or drive-thrus or endless snacks and convenience foods. And then starting in like 1977, the USDA published their dietary guidelines, and we're told to eat a higher carbohydrate diet and a lower fat diet. And we were advised to increase our meal frequency and snack in between our meals. I mean, these are incredible influences that change our metabolism, our energy levels, and our nutritional intake. And then we're at, 2003, when everybody's eating breads and crackers and convenience foods and lots of low-calorie, low-fat snacks, and we're eating 6 times a day. I mean, that means our body's always processing food, always working hard to shuttle the sugar from our bloodstream and working hard to digest what's in our stomach. What happens when we're constantly eating like that? Well, our body is constantly busy digesting, and digestion is this energy-demanding process that can continue for hours to finish the elements of your meals, even days. And when we're constantly eating, that also means we're constantly producing insulin. Have you ever heard of the hormone called insulin? It's super duper important. Well, insulin matters so much because it holds the key to the fat that's already stored in your fat tissues. And it matters for like a dozen reasons more that affect our health in major ways, but I have a hunch that you want to hear about that fat storage thing. So, well, here's how insulin basically works in response to what we eat. When we consume carbohydrates, and proteins too, but especially carbs, our blood sugar concentration goes up. And then our pancreas releases the hormone insulin to help shuttle that blood sugar from our bloodstream and convert it in our liver and send it to our cells and our tissues so it can be stored as glycogen. That's where there's limited space. There's limited storage there. So anything extra gets stored as fat. And we have to go through all those excess carbs we've been eating before we can tap into the fat. And throughout this entire process, insulin stops your fat from being burned. You'd have to run out of all the stored glycogen, stop producing insulin in order to get that body fat to start burning. Now, when we eat carbs and sugar often enough to create chronically elevated blood sugar, our cells stop listening to insulin, and the insulin production just keeps ramping up because it's trying to get your sugar back down. And by the way, when I say sugar, I'm also talking about carbs. Same thing in this regard. So excess sugar in the bloodstream is toxic, which is why insulin runs the show. Everything has to stop so your body can take care of that sugar in your bloodstream. So here we are with chronically high blood sugar, like most Americans, because we're eating bread and crackers and flour-based foods and dessert every day. And it doesn't matter if it's whole grains or low fat, none of that matters. Our body's constantly pumping out more and more insulin trying to handle the issue, and our cells aren't listening, they're resisting. This is called insulin resistance, this gateway to type 2 diabetes. And insulin resistance is so bad, every health professional agrees across the board. This can lead to weight gain and increased obesity and diabetes, of course, but also cardiovascular disease and cancer, even autoimmune diseases, depression, and all sorts of pain and inflammation in the body. And the only way to prevent such catastrophes with your health is to optimize your diet to a more natural intake of carbs and sugar. Now, it's pretty clear what a natural intake of carbs and sugar is when we look throughout most of human history. We got to think, what did the earth design us to eat before there were civilizations, before there were farms making our food and all this processed stuff? Humans would eat whatever they could gather or hunt or fish. I mean, they couldn't even farm back in those times because they didn't stay in one place long enough. They weren't civilized. And then the winters would come, and that would mean you can eat whatever you preserved. You didn't have a refrigerator. Or you could fast. The times were scarce, right? But when the agricultural revolution occurred thousands and thousands of years ago, we started to grow food as a community. Agriculture, right? Now, during this time, we're growing acres of grains because they're cheap and we can feed a lot of people. But this changed everything. We weren't taking in all these nutritious foods. We weren't depending on things that we could hunt or gather, and we ate a lot of grains. Then comes the Industrial Revolution. Factories are making grains into flour and shipping it by the bagful, and then processed foods and flour-based foods are readily available and at a cheap price. I mean, it became so easy and so cheap to make food out of flour, out of grains. So what's really wrong with that? Well, everything about our nutrient intake changed. Here's a way I like to look at it. Did you know that bread was a food eaten by the poor? I mean, our distant relatives and ancestors knew that it was not a nourishing food. It was used to feed the starving and the needy, not a primary food source. And the reason this matters is because humans thrived and our genes evolved on a diet mostly of vegetables and fruits and tubers and nuts and seafood and meat and things that we could get ourselves in the wild until farms and factories made our flour-based foods, right? So let's think about bread for a minute. If you were making bread from scratch, what is that process like? We're talking about getting the seeds from the field and hulling them and making them into flour yourself and grinding them, making the dough, fermenting the dough because there was no other way to preserve it back then, and then proof it and bake it. I mean, baking is a long process. That's why bread should be a food for celebration. This is how I like to look at it. If you're not willing to make bread or flour-based foods from scratch as often as you're eating it, that's your flashing sign that it's a treat, not something intended for every meal or even every day. Without factories or preservatives, I mean, there'd be no way we could be consuming all these flour-based carbs on a daily basis. So let's think together. What are the most addicting, favorite, common foods that are preventing us from losing weight and feeling good and getting the right nutrition? I'm thinking crusty breads and pasta and pizza, of course, and bagels and cereal. I mean, I know you love them, but they're everywhere we turn. That's why we eat them. They're addicting and they're cheap to make and they're cheap to buy. But even though factories and machines can make it for us, it's cheap and readily available, we have to start looking at it like sugar or alcohol. These are treats. They were never intended as a staple of the human diet, and our bodies can't keep up. Remember what I was telling you about insulin? Well, too much insulin and blood sugar surges has a lot to do with your appetite and your cravings and your mood and your energy. We want to keep insulin levels as low and steady as possible by moderating our carb intake. And lucky for all of us, this same strategy is what will help free yourself from a lifetime of weight gain and constant dieting. So here are 4 steps to help you get started on this ideal path towards better health and a foundational diet that makes sense, feels good, and keeps the weight off. Well, step 1 is to get realistic with your current carb intake so that you can start adjusting accordingly. This means you're going to have to start turning your food packages around and looking at those carbohydrates per serving, the size of the serving that you eat. Look at the sugar grams too. You might even consider tracking them. Tracking your sugar and carbs for just a few days gives you a great point of reference. I mean, how much are you really taking in? A great app for that is called Carbs Control. Now, step 2 is to adjust your carb intake to something more natural, 100 to 150 grams of carbs a day. This can vary on your activity level and your size and your state of health, and a health coach or dietitian can help you with that. But an ideal range for most adults is 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. And when you cut back on your carbohydrates, you have to take up your colorful vegetables, up your quality fats like olive oil and grass-fed butter and nuts. And you're going to have to be sure you're eating enough protein at your meals. And guess what that means? You're grocery shopping for fresh food more often, you're putting in a little more planning for your meals, cooking more, and you're starting to eat stuff in bowls instead of between 2 slices of bread. That's right. Now, step 3 makes step 2 easier and more effective when you hone in on your tripwires like dessert habits, sweetened drinks, and fast food. A great place to start is to try a method I use called Are You an Abstainer or a Moderator? Now, this framework was created by Gretchen Rubin, a happiness and habits expert, and it's designed to open your eyes to the fact that it may be realistic for you to eat certain foods in moderation, but other foods cause you to lose control. That's me with French fries. So I'm offering you one of my favorite worksheets that always gets my clients into a major wow moment. I created this worksheet to help you see which carb-based foods make you spin out of control and which ones help you feel satisfied. So go ahead and grab this awesome free worksheet so you can get started. It's at marisamoon.com/abstain-freebie. Remember, if you're a soda drinker, like regular or diet soda, that's a really good place to start too. Any sweetened drinks, even like sugar-free energy drinks. Now, I've summarized all the top ways to cut that habit in my podcast, The Foundation of Wellness, on episode number 33, Why and How to Quit a Soda or Pop Habit. And that's at marisamoon.com/podcast. So the final step comes once you get into the rhythm of a healthy carb intake. Like around 21 days of optimizing your carb intake, you're going to notice you'll be able to go longer between your meals without any snacks. And at this stage, you should be able to go 12 hours overnight between your last bite of dinner and your first bite of breakfast the next day. It's essentially intermittent fasting. And that would mean you're stopping dinner maybe 8 p.m., then you don't eat until 8 a.m. the next day. This beginner level of intermittent fasting is something I really believe all adults should strive for to help fight disease, optimize your energy and metabolism, and keep you young and the weight that you're supposed to be at. And I teach all of this and more in my course called Intermittent Fasting Freedom. It's full of insightful worksheets like that, the one that I got ready for you, so grab it at marisamoon.com/abstain-freebie so you can identify which carbs spin you out of control. So there you go. I think you have plenty of places to start with so you can have more energy and stop that yo-yo dieting. And I'm sure you have questions, so send them my way. You can find me on Instagram at Marisa Moon and Facebook at Marisa Moon Wellness. Let me know what you discovered in that worksheet. Are you an abstainer or a moderator? I want to know what you learned. Bye.